spring is a big time for development. And I'm going based off my last spring I had and just knowing the benefits I had with being able to go through a spring. Now this second time going around spring, now I'm really looking into just being able to fine tune a lot of the details that I had and to work and learn the new things I have and just be able to compete with the great group of guys that are here.
Good afternoon, everybody. That was Michigan linebacker Ernest Hausmann. Thanks to mgoblue.com for the audio. Hausmann, one of those magnificent 7 transfers that came into the Michigan football program this year, and he's one of them that's available for spring and talking about it as they got underway last week. And we get underway on Wednesdays with former Wolverine Jim Scarcelli. Scar, it's great to see you. How are you?
Hey, everything's good, Danny. That kid is a heck of a football player, man. He made some plays up in the big house. He's big, he's fast, he's athletic. I saw him run down J.J. McCarthy one time. Big play. So that linebacker room is good. There's competition there. It will not be like last year, where that was a position where we were bouncing guys around to have depth, and there's a lot of good players there.
Big, fast, and athletic. That sounds good to me. What else sounds good are the things that we're talking about today. We think about what we're going to talk about, and then we bring it to you at 1 o'clock here on the Maize and Blue Review, presented by Rivals. We're live 1 o'clock weekdays. It's been for a little while here in the off season that Jim Scarcelli has joined us on Wednesdays. We have turned the calendar, Scar. It is March, so we've got March Madness to talk about with the Wolverines on the eve of playing their penultimate regular season game tomorrow in Champaign, Illinois. We will get to that coming up. Being March 1st and everything else, it also means that we are 1 month away from the spring game. So we have some Michigan football to talk about. Deion Sanders and his recruiting methods, we will discuss that. But before we get to anything else, we always say, 98% of the time we're talking about Michigan football. This isn't specifically about Michigan football, but this is the top story of the day in sports, and it's the details in the Georgia football crash that killed 2 people. And an arrest warrant has been issued today for the potential top pick in the draft, Jalen Carter, for his alleged role in that January crash. Allegedly, Carter was street racing with a Georgia staffer before the staffer's vehicle crashed into a telephone pole, and Carter was at the combine in Indianapolis, which is going on, and looking at the report of 2 misdemeanors. I saw CBS say these charges, this is a misdemeanor arrest warrant, but reckless driving and racing. And you have some of the details about the people that were killed. They were driving over 100 miles an hour, and their blood alcohol, the driver was over. This was something that happened at 2:30 in the morning. And also they said that the crash was consistent with racing. They were able to determine that, however they do that. And then there's the blood alcohol level at 0.197. Nothing good when it comes to that investigation. So I'll ask you, I'll specifically just throw the questions your way, Scar. When you look at something like this, let's talk about just this is a sports story, but this could be anybody, but because it's Georgia, it's college football, it's the top story of the day. What do you think about when you see a story like this?
Yeah, Danny, I've been through it. I've seen it. I did dumb things. I know that you recruit guys. I don't know if this kid has done anything like questionable in his past. He probably hasn't. And as a coach, you are hammering on these things all the time. Coaches are hammering on this stuff all the time. 365. Do the right thing in school. Go to school. Take care of your schoolwork. Act right on campus. Bo was hammering on this stuff all the time. And he talked about, hanger-ons. He used to call them hanger-ons. These guys that are hanging around the athletes. Some of them are questionable influences. Sometimes he referred to them as pissants. Some of these guys that are just, they can bring you down. You got to watch who you're hanging with, man. You got to watch who you're hanging with, because some of them, they got the wrong intentions. And he just looks like he got weak. He let some people influence him. One of the greatest days of his career, of his life, just won a championship, and you let these people that his associates, whatever, talk you into getting involved with this kind of stuff. And I hope he's accused right now. It's whatever it is, but he lets the wrong people influence him. Coaches are constantly hammering it. I heard it from my coaches. I constantly did it as a coach too, all the time. And I used to tell my guys, man, especially teams I had that were, on the verge of winning a championship or going to win it, looking to win a championship as the season goes on. I used to tell them all the time, man, that the liquor stores ain't going nowhere. The parties and the girls, they ain't going nowhere. They're going to be there forever. And in talking about this, something that we've taken for granted is Jim has done a pretty good job of keeping his guys on the straight and narrow, doing the right thing on campus. We haven't had many incidents since he's been there. So I want to take an opportunity to, say, hey, our coach, knock on wood, has done a pretty good job, but coaches are constantly hammering at this stuff. Players got to be mentally tough and not hang around with hanger-ons.
Yeah, well, in this situation, you have somebody that was with the football team and also a football staffer. So, I don't know if it was all, the players that were at this establishment that they left, but, he left and they were people connected with the football team. But, this is one of the cautionary tales that you don't like to have come up, and yet they come up way too often. Like, I hear people talking about, especially in the South, but it seems like in the South, people, they do drag race. And, that happens all the time, whether it's not legal, and whether you think it's, something that, hey, everybody does or anything else, like drinking and driving. Don't drink and drive. Don't drive in excess. This car was reported to be going over 100 miles an hour. And if you're racing somebody when you're twice the limit of, what you are allowed to be driving, and then you're driving over 100 miles an hour, you're bound to have things happen there. Jalen Carter's lucky that he's alive. Now, he's given 3 different accounts of what happened. At first, he was way ahead of the accident, then he was behind, and then there was a report, that he was right next to him. So we're not sure about what he gets with his story here. But the part where there's these are a misdemeanor arrest warrant. You say that's it for him, but we'll find out, what happens with him. He's definitely in, the focus right now is the combine. Everybody's talking about the draft, and, he's been, speculated as being number 1 pick, certainly one of the top 5 picks. Scar, you already mentioned Michigan, if you're somebody that is driving recruits around, I would imagine the number 1 thing that, that they're talking about is, driving safely, and certainly, not being under the influence of alcohol or driving reckless. So all of those things, again, reminders like, that they'll go back to. And when you get into a situation, said Michigan's doing, relatively a good job there. I think you could say, that, although, Michigan had their, they had one of their high profile players in a situation that a lot of people on the outside of Michigan looking in, you would say, hey, well, what about that situation? So, it's not like Michigan just went through and didn't have any.
No, I know, Danny. There's 140 players on Michigan's football team. And, there's a lot of room for error there. Guys that are going to do something stupid. I played with a guy. He was started as a freshman in the Rose Bowl. And you would have thought this guy had the world by the cojones, man, and found a way to do something stupid. And the next thing you know, he's gone off the team. So I've seen guys throw away a lot of stuff, man. And it happens. They get around the wrong guy. They get influenced by the wrong people. And these are the things that, you talk about senior leadership. This is the stuff where really senior leadership is big, because the coach ain't there all the time. The assistant coaches aren't there all the time on campus, at the parties, at the clubs, when after a big win, who's looking after each other? Who's saying, hey, man, go home, or, you're in the wrong place. Don't go, get your butt home. That's where your senior leadership and your the tradition of how things are passed down within your program. But,
I also think like this with name, image, and likeness now, not like in the past, players didn't have cars or even have fast cars, but now players are getting high performance cars. And you see it in the NFL, like Myles Garrett last year to miss some time because he was, this is not the first time we've seen it, but in the pros, I mean, they've got, fast cars and Garrett was driving, in excess and he crashed. So that's a little bit of a new wrinkle. Like, all of the guys have super nice, brand new, and you can think fast cars. So, a time to say, okay, again, they all know that they're not supposed to be drinking or, drugged up and driving, but going over 100 miles an hour, racing. I mean, all these things you point, hey, that's how quick it can happen. Now,
let me end it on this. I know you want, but I know we got a lot of good stuff to talk. If I was a coach, college coach, high school coach, this story right here, I would review this story every year with my team. This story would be covered every year, especially as you're working in. Especially if you want something big or you're getting ready to play in a big game, and you talk about doing the right thing after games, and this is a story I would talk about every year with my team.
Well, it's a good thing and a cautionary tale. And yet, let's look at it from a pro perspective and the Detroit Lions in terms of the draft. The Lions have the 6th pick in the NFL draft. And I already mentioned that this player, Carter, was under consideration for the number 1 pick, certainly in the top 5. And then you think, well, if he's going to slide a little bit at 6, would the Lions consider taking him? And because of these are misdemeanor charges, and I know a lot of people will be like, oh, yeah, these are big time red flags. And, you can, however you want to determine that these are big time red flags. I don't know if we'll be able to find out if he was drinking under influence. He denied that he was, racing the other car. He did have 3 different stories here, but this could be the part where it's not a cautionary tale. I don't think that he's falling out of the top 6 or 7 in the draft. Maybe he was going to go number 1. You could say, oh, well, that cost you 5 positions, but is that going to be enough for people to be like, oh boy, I better make sure I'm not out, in my car driving fast? I don't know. Like, do you think that the Lions are going to say, oh no, we're taking him off our board now?
Yeah. That's a question for the values of the leadership. Do they want to, they're going to have a fan base that will be, that will have a problem with it. The kid is a great player. There's no question. This kid is a really, really good football player. And that's a question for, the marketing and the image of the team and the community. What are the forwards and, the general manager, what do they want to do there? Because there's going to be a pushback. There's going to be some anytime you take a kid like that, and they just have to weigh it. But this kid is a good player. It definitely cost him money. I believe it's going to cost him some money in terms of how high he's picked.
Yeah, we'll see. All that you say in the time and in the moment, it is going to be talked about a lot. And there will be a lot of people that will say things about like, oh, I can't believe that they did this. Let's just say that the Lions did pick him at 6. But if it works out and he plays, he keeps his nose clean, and this is 2 misdemeanor charges, everything, terrible story and all of that. But if he comes out and then he plays well, people will be like, what a great pick, and they love him, and he got a second chance and everything else, and all of that about everybody disappears really quick. So I don't know. Football teams, you'd like to have, great personal conduct and, players in the community and all of that. Those things are great. But also they're trying to win football games. And so, if you've got a guy and you look at these charges and you say, all right, driving recklessly and, giving some false statements or whatever, this is it. He's had a speeding ticket in the past. Is that something that's, going to make you move off him? All right. It's all things. It's the top story today. what people are talking about, that's for sure, Scars. Don't you have any last point that you wanted to make on it?
No, we covered it pretty good there.
All right. Good job. Well, let's get to Michigan. They are sitting with 2 games left in the regular season. Tomorrow at Illinois, Sunday at Indiana. I couldn't believe that Indiana got popped. Here I was yesterday talking about, I think Indiana is the best team in the Big Ten. I watched them go into Purdue and just rout and take the Boilermakers apart. And then Iowa comes in and does the same thing to them last night, which was a real shocker to me. But how do you look at it here for Michigan sitting with 17 wins and with, at least 3 games left with the 2 in the regular season this week?
Denny, I think if we can win one of those games will be tough. I mean, they're both on the road, but if you get a hot shooting team, Iowa went in there and Iowa's tough. They can shoot the ball, but if we can win one of those games and win 2 tournament games, I think we're in the NCAA tournament. But we got to win, I think, 3 more games. But listen, we're Jett Howard's out, and we've been doing some pretty good things, and we just got to have a good night shooting, and hopefully Illinois or Indiana, one of them will have an average to below average day shooting, and our guys, come out shooting. And but that's how I see it. We got to win one of these 2 and maybe 2 of the Big Ten tournament games.
You mentioned Jett Howard. He did go through warmups with the team on Sunday prior to game with Wisconsin, and then we do know that he did not play. Let's say that he's available coming up tomorrow night. Scar, you've coached football and basketball. You've won 3 in a row, and 2 of those have been without Jett. And he got hurt in the first half of the other game, so they've been on a nice run without Jett Howard. Meanwhile, he's their best outside shooter, second leading scorer. You automatically, if you're Juwan Howard, insert him back into the starting lineup, or do you do it a different way?
I think that one of the games that Williams had one of his below average games, and then he got hurt supposedly, and then you saw Shetter in there for a couple games starting. I thought that Juwan was saying, okay, we're going to start playing for the future now, because that's what coaches will do. If you get to a certain point and you don't have a chance to win a championship, you just start playing for the future and start playing some more young guys. And I don't know if that's true or not. It's a theory I had, because you're seeing more minutes from Shetter, and he's a guy that would be around, because you got Doug and Reed and Shetter now. That's developing and working toward the future. So anyway, Jett Howard is probably one and done. So it's interesting. How much minutes do you give them? But now they're now they're trying to play for a tournament bid. They actually have an opportunity. Who thought they'd go to Rutgers and win? And they're on a pretty good little roll here now. So if he is healthy and he is ready to go, I'm sure Juwan would start him and get him right back in. But at the same time, I wonder if he's thinking about more time for Cheddar and the future. Just a thought that I would have if I'm coaching.
Yeah, well, on those points there, the future is now. I mean, if you win 2 out of 3 games, you're in the tournament and you've had a successful year. If you're fooling around thinking about the future, like for next year, and you don't play what you think is your best starting lineup because you're thinking about the future, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, or you're doing something stupid, because if you don't get into the tournament, everybody's going to be all over you. So you better think about trying to do your best right now. Cheddar really hasn't done anything in the starting lineup. And you can't think that TW2 coming back, unless you look at that plus minus where he was a plus 20, he's done a nice job defensively. I think almost every coach with this situation would put Jett Howard back into the starting lineup, unless you think that you have something where you just like the 2-3-man game with Kobe Buffkin and Doug McDaniel and with Hunter Dickinson and how that works. And then you look to a second group, whether it's Terrace Reed, and then you have some instant offense that is sitting there that you could bring in, who doesn't really need a lot of chemistry with the team. Or you basically can just give them the ball and let them go. I hearken back to the Oklahoma City Thunder when they had Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and they had James Harden, the beard, all three of those guys, all-stars. They're probably all going to be in the Hall of Fame. They didn't start Harden. They had him off the bench with the second group. The idea was let Harden come in and go to work. He doesn't need it. Just throw him the ball and let him go. In this situation, Jett Howard would be James Harden. Now, that's a way different way to think of things. I don't think Juwan is thinking about it that way, but there is something to look at, and it's in the pros. I wonder if he's thought about it or if he's just like, nah, he's back in there. I don't know.
Yes, Doug is really doing some good things. And sometimes when Jett's in the game, the ball kind of stops. There's some pretty good movement, good flow. And, he's a young kid. He's got a lot of talent. But sometimes the ball stops when he gets it. The movement stops. That's the only thing I've seen that I would question at times. The flow, the movement.
Flow and movement is something to question, especially somebody who has coached the game before like you. Scar, let's get to some football. I want to tell people that if they did not know, that they can join up the Maize and Blue Review today by going to michigan.rivals.com. You want to know what's going on with football, basketball, all day, all night, recruiting. You go there and instantaneously and before anyone else, go to michigan.rivals.com to get that done. All right. Jim Harbaugh talked last week, late after we talked on Wednesday, and we do have some relatively breaking news when it comes down to Michigan. Jesse Minter did interview with the Eagles, but yesterday Pete Carroll at the Combine, the Seahawks coach, said that his defensive assistant, Sean Desai, would be heading to Philly as its defensive coordinator, and I don't think Philly has announced that officially, but when Carroll says his guy's gone, I think that we can say that Jesse Minter is returning for his second season. And how big of a deal is that to you, Scar, that Michigan will have Jesse Minter, or as the players call him, Coach J, back?
I think it's great. It's great that he's that Michigan guys are getting looks. That's great. We talked about that, and it's good that he's coming back. To just keep getting better at what we're doing. I still would like to see other guys get opportunities, but we keep winning, we keep doing well, and and that's a great thing that he's back. But it's also good that he's people want him. I saw Danny. I also saw another John Harbaugh guy, defensive assistant. UCLA hired a John Harbaugh assistant as his defensive coordinator. I don't have his name, but the new defensive coordinator at UCLA was an assistant under the John Harbaugh, Mike McDonald, Wink Martindale, the whole. So it's the same kind of bloodlines as we got. So UCLA, and we're going to be playing them the next year. The guy has the similar bloodlines as Minter.
Smart move. The Eagles did confirm that Desai is their new coordinator, so it's official. Minter is back, if you didn't think it was before. Good point about teams. It's smart, going to the Ravens and getting somebody off their tree. Yeah.
The downside of that, though, Denny, listen, this Wink Martindale, Mike McDonald, this scheme that those guys developed with Jim Harbaugh or John Harbaugh over the years, there's a lot of good stuff, and we've seen it now the last 2 years with Mike McDonald and now with Minter. But the problem is, if a lot of people are running that stuff, the opponents are going to see more and more of that philosophy, that scheme. So there's a downside to when you keep continually going through a certain philosophy and it gets permeated through a lot of college football, then a lot of people see your stuff also. So there's a downside to it.
Yeah, just think about 2 years ago, Harbaugh didn't want anybody coming to the spring game. And part of it was like, he didn't have to take the curtains up on this new defense that everybody was going to be able to see. He was also able to use, the pandemic situation was still there. But I think also part of it was like, he didn't have to show anybody what's going on with his defense. Forget it. But that was something I was thinking about as well. How about whether it was a strategy, whether he earned it in 3 days of spring or whatever they do in winter conditioning. When Harbaugh was asked about the competition at the corner opposite of Will Johnson, he said, Amarian Walker's the guy. Amarian Walker, who was a wide receiver last year, he's the starting corner right now as of last Thursday for Michigan. That was a little bit surprising to hear the coach just tab him just like that. What'd you think?
Denny, I know as a coach, you have your big games on your schedule, and you will do things to beat those teams, whether it's schematically, whether it's position-wise, player-wise, personnel-wise. So when I see this, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that big, tall receiver from Michigan State. What was that kid's name they threw that jump ball to?
Yeah.
I forget his name, but you know who I'm talking about. The kid had a field day with us for a while until we had to overcommit to defend that kid. Ohio State has a kid named Harrison, big 6'3" receiver too, coming back. So our biggest rivals, games we have to win, Michigan State, Ohio State. If I'm coaching that defense and I got to defend those guys, I'm going to have me some tall corners. I might compromise on some other stuff, maybe a guy's ability to tackle or his ability to cover or this, that, but he ain't going to get out jumped. We're not going to allow Michigan State to throw jump balls again at our corners like they did last year. I mean, it got to be pretty bad there for a while. So when I see this, the kid's tall. He's an athletic kid, and Jim, said right away, God, the kid's, he's starting. So it's a great thing. He's again, maybe it's a Woodson type deal. He said he might play him both ways. And I think as a program, as a coach, you can't shy away from the Heisman Trophy and the promotion of a potential Heisman Trophy guy. So maybe, this is a guy that Jim thinks that we can maybe market that will be that kind of a great player. He can be a two-way guy, and all that stuff it helps recruiting and all that. But I see it as a great thing to defend our two hated enemies. They ain't throwing jump balls at us. So we got two tall corners. They ain't doing it to Johnson, and they ain't doing it to this kid.
Keon Coleman.
That's the guy.
His name, and he is 6'4", as you mentioned. And I would bet if I looked at Marvin Harrison Jr., he is all of 6'4". But I'm going to check just to see what they put Marvin here. He's 6'4" too.
So there you go.
Our 6'4".
See, that's Scar. See, Denny, that's Scar, the old coach, thinking that decision has a whole lot to do with those two guys. I guarantee it.
I like it. I didn't think of that part. That's a nice.
That's why I'm the old coach, D.
Hey, I like it. I'm telling you, that's you will hear me from here to the start of the season for the next 6 months talking about, hey, remember Keon Coleman, Marvin Harrison? They're both 6'4". How tall is Amarian Walker? Oh, yeah, 6'4". I'll reference you, Scar, when I say it a few times.
There you go. So now we got a chance defending these guys. No more jump balls.
All right, let's stay with college football. Primetime had a few things to say recently, and he's getting some pushback from some folks. But if you didn't see it, Deion Sanders said recently that he recruits quarterbacks with a high GPA who are from, quote-unquote, dual parent homes. And he also looks for, quote-unquote, single mama households for defensive linemen he tries to sign. He says it's a whole different attribute that you look for in different positions. What did you think when you heard Coach Prime say this?
Well, I question some of that stuff. So some of our listeners that don't know, I'm a 25-year teacher, public school teacher, 25 years coaching in the public schools, and I've seen a lot of different kids from a lot of different backgrounds do a lot of different things. And I agree that the most important position you have to identify is your quarterback. Okay, you better have a quarterback that is not going to get in trouble in school. He's going to have his grades straight. He's not going to be fighting with anybody in the classroom. And, he's a reliable guy. Of course you want reliable. That was the number one attribute I was pounding on with my guys all the time is reliable. I got to have you there every day. I can't hear about you doing stupid things, grades, this or that or whatever. But the quarterback position is the most important. So he wants dual parent guys at the quarterback position. I've had some really, really great kids that come from grandma raised 6, 8 kids I remember one family we had that was just all great kids. Mom or dad weren't even in the picture. Grandma raised them, great kids. And could have played them at any position. But listen, he's got his thoughts on that. I question it because I've seen kids that come from 2-parent families that had problems. They weren't, dysfunctional kids. And I seen kids that didn't have no mom or dad or anybody. Somebody else raised them that were just really great attitude, hardworking, reliable, on time, every day, guys. So, I question a lot of that because I think it's just I don't know that it always applies.
Yeah, well, I look at this as Deion Sanders taking advantage of who he is to try to become what kind of coach that he wants to be, which is going to be a great coach and be one of the best coaches. There's not many coaches that could get away with saying this. And I'm not a big fan of what if a white guy said this, but if a white guy and if a white coach said this, he might be out of the league. He might not be a coach anymore. But Deion Sanders, he's somebody that could just smile and say, look, I'm just telling you like it is. You don't like it? Too bad. And that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And even the people that are already criticizing him, he's going to say, what am I saying that's not true? You don't like it? Too bad. And there'll be a lot of players that'll be like, I'm going with Coach Prime because he's telling it like it is. And so, yeah, I think he will get criticized a lot. And there's a point when you bring up to who's saying something, when they're saying it, how they're saying it, who they are, and all those things apply here. Deion Sanders knows what he can get away with.
I agree with some of that silver spoon stuff. I coached kids from, different types of communities that, some had a little more money and some kids didn't have anything. And there's a little bit to that, that hunger. I get that part. He talked about a single parent kid going to be a little more hungry as a defensive lineman. I don't know. There's guys that come from 2-parent families that struggle. Their household struggles. But hey, man, listen. And Antoine has a good point. It's getting Deion in the headlines, and maybe that's part of his master plan. Just get more and more people talking about Deion. But I've seen hungry kids from all kinds of backgrounds, and
Yeah, well, I think Deion said this on the Rich Eisen show, the former Wolverine, in national radio shows like having Deion Sanders come on, because Deion Sanders is going to say he's not just talking about we're going out and trying to work hard every day and we're just taking it one game at a time and we're just trying to get 1% better. He's not saying things like that. He's saying things like this, which it's going to get his name out there a little bit more. So there you go. Yeah. And some people will say this: Deion is a fraud. He'll be an analyst in 3 years. Well, he's getting a lot of players.
Yeah, Denny, I tell you, I talk to guys that are in high school coaching and in the city in Detroit, and I've got guys that are friends. Let me tell you something. Deion, there's a lot of interest. There's guys that are interested in playing for Deion Sanders. It is what it is, man. So, he might be talking and he has an unconventional way of doing things now, but I do know that there's a draw there. Okay. There's guys that want to play for him that are attracted to that. So,
hey, look, I just tell you this, Scar. I can remember from the days that he was at Florida State. He was driving up to games in a limo when he was in college. Back then, it was like, nobody could do that. What's this prime time doing? He's coming out with a chain. Everybody's like, where's he getting the chain from? And Deion would just smile and say, I'm prime time. And then he was playing, he's playing in the World Series. He's playing in the NFL. I mean, Deion Sanders has been, it had the world revolving around him since I can remember in the late 80s. And, it's been prime time's world, since then. And it is just, it continued on. So people can say anything they want about prime time. This has been who he is all along. Whether you think he's grandstanding, saying things other people can't see, that's prime time. for you.
Yeah, I just know it's real though, man. There's guys that want to play for him, so he's gonna have the ability to recruit. And, can he coach? Put it all together out there in Boulder? We'll see.
All right, let's bring you back to Michigan football, Scar. And there was some news also Thursday about a position group, and that was the offensive line. And we heard at the beginning of the show from Ernest Hausmann, one of the Magnificent Seven, as one of the 7 transfers that Michigan brought in. 3 of the transfers were on the offensive line. Ladarius Henderson, a grad transfer from Arizona State. He is not in camp. He is not going to be in for spring football. They talked about him getting in for summer. Chris Hinton and Drake Nugent. I said his name was Chris Hinton. It's Miles Hinton. Sorry, Miles Hinton. Chris was his brother, right? Miles Hinton and Drake Nugent, both from Stanford, are dealing with injuries. So now you're talking about the competition in spring. I mean, these guys that I put up on the screen that we know a lot about, but not Henderson, Hinton, and Nugent. You got Piercy, Keegan, and Zinter, who we know will be at the guards. But then you think Greg Crippen or Raheem Anderson, 2 guys on roster, would be the ones at center when we're talking about the spring game, and out at right tackle, Trente Jones and Carson Barnhart. Those are a lot of offensive linemen. Who are the best 5 out of this?
Danny, leave that right up there for a second. Jim, I listened to Jim's comment, and he talked about having 7 starters. Said he's got 7 starters right now, okay? And he was talking about Percy, Keegan, El-Hadi, Crippen, Zinter, Jones, and Barnhart. Those were the 7 guys he was referring to, okay? He doesn't even mention Henderson, who's out.
Right.
Okay. He doesn't even mention Nugent, who's out, or I know they're high on Gentry, but he doesn't even mention Hinton. So that would be 10. Okay. But what's interesting, and the way I'm looking at this, is a guy that I hadn't heard his name, that I talked about in a couple episodes back, that I thought maybe Greg Crippen might be a guy that we might see transfer, because Jim hasn't talked about him. He didn't play much as a backup, but he may have really developed in the weight room, whatever. And I thought Raheem Anderson was going to be the next guy in line. But now he doesn't mention Jim. See, I'm always listening to what are the names he's mentioning. And then it's not, we've always heard people say this, Danny. It's not what people say, it's what they don't say too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard that statement. So anyway, he hasn't mentioned Raheem Anderson so much. He talked about Crippen. So Crippen is a guy who's done some things that is maybe going to be able to hold on. Is he going to be able to hold off this kid Nugent, who's got 30 starts under his belt? So that's anyway. My point is, Jim mentioned 7, and he's not talking about none of these guys that are out. He's not talking about Henderson, Hinton, or Nugent. So that means we got 10 guys that can play, that they feel real comfortable, because I guarantee you those transfers are going to be able to play. We already know they can play. We've seen film on them. So now that gives us 10 players. Who's going to be coming back? Who's going to be leaving after spring football? So it's interesting. There's a ton of depth. It's a great situation as a coach. The biggest challenge is developing all of them and somehow finding a way to keep all of them there. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, as a coach we have, because there's a lot of serious depth there. Good players.
Well, that's why this could be a little bit of a blessing in disguise with the 3 transfers not coming in, because you'll have a starting 2 deep coming out of spring. But then you're going to have Henderson and Nugent, who a lot of people thought were going to be the starters. And will Harbaugh do a battle royale like he did last year with the quarterbacks and say, hey, look, this is going to be our starting offensive line in game 1 against East Carolina. This is going to be our starting offensive line in game 2 against UNLV. And then we will go from there. What about that point?
Danny, that's a possibility, and it's fair. It's a fair option for these guys to get a look in them 3 games and try to size them up and see where they come out. But yeah, you'd hate to be, again, I've been in that position. I hate to be a guy like Jeff Percy, who's paid his dues, grinded, in L&D, paid his dues, grinded, ready to go, ready to start. Crippen, highly recruited kid, ready to go, ready to start. And then, and then now you go through spring ball, you come out starting, and then, you're committed to Michigan. Michigan's committed to you. And now the first game, the first couple games of the year, you're rotating with this big time transfers. And somehow they find out that you're not the guy. They feel you're not the guy. And now you're back on the bench again. So listen, that's the reality of what it is. Life ain't always fair. But, those guys are going to have to make some decisions. And they're obviously they're not going to see the competition until they've already committed. Because obviously that after that first game is played, school's already started, so they can't transfer. So that's the kind of the deal that's going in, just like the Cade McNamara, JJ stuff that we just went through.
Yeah, it doesn't seem possible that they would be able to keep all of these guys and be running some kind of, 5-man rotation in one game and 5-man rotation in the other. Maybe a player or two, for that competition. Let me ask you this part. You've got guys that are right tackles in Trente Jones and Carson Barnhart. What about the possibility of those guys? You're always saying you want the 5 best. What about one of those guys being able to play left tackle? What about somebody like, I don't think Gio El Hadi, he's 6'4". I don't see him kicking out the guard, but Zinter has been talked about in the past as being a center. And Keegan is 6'6". Could he potentially play tackle? Then you would have El Hadi in there. There's about the 5 spots and guys playing different positions. This is what spring, they'll be experimenting with some of that too. I mean, it wouldn't be a huge surprise.
I wouldn't, Denny. I would not. My philosophy was, listen, yeah, you want to move some guys around, but Zach Zinter, I'm not touching him. He's been their guard for 3 years. I'm not touching Keegan. I am not. Them guys have perfected. You just continue to reap the benefits of guys who have perfected a position.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would move those guys at all. I think El Hadi is a guard. But the bottom line is, Jim mentioned 7 that he has a lot of faith in, and that's not even counting those transfers. It almost looks like, we've over-recruited at the offensive line because there's so many. And then there's a lot of good-looking backups that are there too. But 85 scholarships, and that's where we're at. Obviously, Jim doesn't want to get caught shorthanded with talent there, but some of those names that you didn't hear, Gaitis. Jim was high on this kid Gaitis for a while. He didn't mention his name. He didn't mention Raheem Henderson. So those are names of those guys. Those are some names that you could see possibly in the portal at the end of spring ball.
Yeah, Derek Jadis, who transferred over from moved over from the defensive side to the offensive side last year. There you go. Yeah.
Denny, some other college football stuff that I don't know if you had it on your notes. Something that I see, I look at some of these coaches. I saw Nick Saban hired a guy who worked at Liberty under Freeze. Okay, so he hired an assistant who worked under Freeze, Auburn's new coach. So he's got a guy, knows their system, bring him into my camp, try to learn what old Freeze is doing for our big rival game. He also hired Tommy Rees, a former Brian Kelly guy at Notre Dame. So I guess it's really about knowing your enemy. We talk about, the old Sun Tzu, know your enemy like you know thyself, right? And that's that's one of the books I had on my desk forever. And I just want to talk about it because I would think along those lines also, if I'm building a program, and I got a couple of my big time games that I got to win, I wouldn't mind hiring someone who worked with those guys to really let me know how they think and how they go about doing things. And I see Saban doing some of that.
Yeah, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Does that work?
That's right. That's that's a whole nother deal. But
maybe for Michigan solved the Ohio State riddle. Maybe they need to go down to Georgia and look for a Georgia assistant if something comes free. Maybe that's the route maybe Jim Harbaugh if he wanted to follow Nick Saban. I don't think it's a TCU situation. I think Georgia's the one.
Speaking of TCU, though, I saw where they had the teams that had the most guys in the combine or draftable guys. TCU was right there. They had a bunch of guys. So it's not like we lost to a team that didn't have pro prospects. They got players. And in Georgia, yeah, we need to figure out how they're recruiting so many kids every year. But they can coach too. I talked about that. They've got good coaches. Kirby Smart is a good coach. He doesn't just win with talent. He's got good scheme. He does good stuff.
Yeah, I'll keep saying this to the day I die when it comes down to TCU in 22 and Michigan in the college football playoff. It came down to 5 plays. The not so Philly special, the 2 pick sixes, the fumble on the goal line, and that Quentin Johnson 76-yard touchdown on the 3rd and 7 that DJ Turner had the ability to stop him short of the sticks. Any of those 5 plays go Michigan's way, Michigan's going to win that game, but you can't have all 5 of them go against you. And they did.
Yeah. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. The Big brothers.
Meanwhile, they didn't have the greatest day with their offensive line or defensive line. They didn't really run the ball, but, if we're just pointing out the plays, that was that I was.
What my position coach used to say about if, Denny? I don't know if I can say it.
No, don't say that one, Scar.
Okay, if you know the one about if my aunt had balls, that one.
Yeah, that one, yeah. She wouldn't be my aunt. I think
she'd be my uncle.
That's
anyway.
Right. All right, we've got one more thing for you, Scar. The Big Ten schedule, and we knew that things are always changing in college football, especially over the last couple of years. It's going to change in the Big Ten because this is going to be the last year without USC and UCLA, and they're going to be set to join the conference next year. This will be the last year of the college football playoff, which is 4 teams, where after next year, they're going to go to 12. So this has the Big Ten thinking about what they're going to do with their scheduling. They're going to scrap, it appears, the East and West. So that's going to be out. It appears that they're going to stay at 9 games. This right now, a 3-3-6 model where they have 3 protected rivals, and then you're going to rotate. This should say 3-6-6, not a 3-3-6. Where they have 3 protected rivals, and then they'll play 6 one year, and then they'll play 6 the next year. So that's what it looks like right now. But all of those things could change. If you thought a little bit about the future of the conference and Michigan.
Yeah, I saw some statements from the committee and the people that are debating this stuff, and they said the number one objective is the college football playoff. Okay, to make and create every opportunity for the Big Ten teams to make that playoff. Yeah, so that's supposedly the number one objective. Okay, and
who said that? Who said that?
That's what I read. CBS had it as the number one objective of the committee. Putting our scheduling together is to make sure that the Big Ten teams can make the college football playoff. Okay, but this day I might go along here because it all gets back to Michigan having to play Ohio State. Okay, I'm going to go on record now. I don't think we should have to play them every year. If you're going to do this, because I think now if they can somehow come up with a schedule where we only got to play them once, but let's say, for example, Ohio State goes undefeated, Michigan loses 1 game, and now we beat Ohio State at the end of the year. So we're 11-1, and they're 11-1. They lost to us. We lost. So now we got to play them again in the Big Ten championship game. I don't want that. Okay, I don't want that. No way, no how. And so you're going to tell me that that kind of a setup is best to get a team in the Big Ten championship or in the college football championship. So I don't like that. You think Auburn?
Well, stop you right there, Scar. What I would say, and if I was on that selection committee, you'd say under that scenario, it would be great for the Big Ten because both of those teams would be getting in. They would just be playing for seeding. And you remember, even in the Harbaugh era, some of us at times thought it was not going as well as we would have liked it. Michigan still at least another 2 times would have been in it. I think 3 times would have been in the college football playoff, even with losing to Ohio State. So under that scenario, what's going to be different is that it's not going to be playing for everything. It's going to be playing for seeding a lot of times, or a bye or a home game, but you'll still be able to get in there. And you might have to play them twice, and you might have to play them twice in 2 weeks, but we got a taste of it. We didn't. Ohio State got a taste of it this year. They lost the big game, and they were crushed, and it was over for a year, and they were downtrodden, and it was the worst loss in the history of the program. And then 2 weeks later, or whatever it was, here they were. They got a reprieve. They were right back in it with all their
everybody in the Big Ten has an advantage if Michigan and Ohio State have to play each other every year.
Well, that's
everybody
true.
has an advantage.
That's true, Scar.
That's what I would say. You know what I would say? You know what I'd say if I'm Ward Manuel? I say, okay, you want us to play Ohio State every year? Then you give us 5 home games, and we never have 5 road games. Never. We got 5 home games every year, 4 on the road. If you want us to play them every year, you got to give us something. Because listen, don't ever underestimate, Danny. I was a player and I was a coach, and I always thought it was so important that my players won a championship, and winning a Big Ten championship, winning a high school championship, whatever it is, your league, whatever it is, you want to always make that your number one goal, because I think it's so important for kids to be on a championship team of some form, whether it's high school or college, whatever it is. And I want to fight that our Michigan players have every fair opportunity to win a Big Ten championship. Because I got a Big Ten championship ring, and I want them to have one, and I want to make it as fair as possible. So when you hear me talking, it's because I want our guys to. I don't want no Michigan State winning championships, not having to play Ohio State like they did. D'Antonio's got 2 or 3 of them like that. He didn't play Ohio State. That's not fair. That's not right. And our guys are going to have to go through this gauntlet. So that's why my feelings are what they are about, this. I want them to win a championship, a Big Ten championship.
And I think whoever the new commissioner is after Kevin Warren is going to say he appreciates that viewpoint and the rich tradition of the Big Ten. But if you can reframe how you look at a Big Ten championship and a national championship, it's about getting into the college football playoff. And now you're going to have 12 teams in there. So yeah, winning a Big Ten title, but now you're talking about, you can tell your guys winning a national championship. And look, I get it. If it was everything revolving around Michigan, everything else, Michigan and Ohio State, I think when you get into those meetings, I think the first thing that they're going to say, this is going to be a non-starter. These 2 teams have to play every year. And it's because it's the greatest rivalry in all of sports. And you're going to have to assume some of the risk in being the two teams that are involved in this, that you have to butt heads and that you might have to play twice, that you are, the most visible teams in the conference. You're 2 of the most visible teams in the country. This is the greatest rivalry in all time. Look at it as the positive, Scar. Michigan is able to use that and how they can use it in recruiting and use it. And they're still going to have a chance, even if they lose that game, to play in the Big Ten championship game. They could lose to Ohio State twice in a year, as distasteful as that sounds, even saying it. And they could still get in. If those were their only 2 losses, they could still get into the college football championship, run the table, and win a national championship.
No, I hear you, Denny. And I just, we'll see what they come up with, man. I believe that the winning the conference title is the most important thing, period. That's just what I believe. The Big Ten championship, it's those rings are forever. And I don't like these other guys having an edge. If you're going to force us to play them, then you give us 5 home games. You make it up another way. Because I was as high school coaches, you want to talk about hostile, heated, argumentative meetings. When high school coaches go on their meetings and they talk about their scheduling also, it's the same kind of stuff. You want to try to get some fairness. So you want your players to play as a high school football team to win a championship. Same thing with the Big Ten. So yeah, I hear all that national championship stuff, but I want my guys walking out of there with a Big Ten championship ring, period.
Scar, what if you had to play? What if I presented this to you if I was the new commissioner? Scar, we just have to play Ohio State for it because it's the greatest rivalry in all sports. We can't take a year off. You're going to have to accept that. Instead of those 5 games, what about your other 2 protected rivals? You can pick anybody you want.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we got to play Michigan State. That game is that game should be
played. Play Michigan State too.
I mean, I just think we have to play them. It's just a game that game.
Right, well, who's the 3rd team then? You get to pick anybody. That's your 3rd team. You want to get that Northwestern rivalry going? They play for a trophy.
Look, we got history with Iowa, Wisconsin.
Well, that's it. You got to pick somebody, though, Scarp. You got to pick one of those rivals. They're pushing
Danny, you want to listen?
You west. They want you to play.
I talked to my buddy. His dad played in the late 40s. I said, was Ohio State, Michigan, was it a big, huge rivalry in 1948, 49, 50? He said, well, yeah, it was big. But Minnesota was the team to beat back then. Tom Harmon never beat Minnesota. I think Schembechler was the guy that really reignited everything to make Schembechler-Hayes to make it such. But, the game obviously was a big game before Schembechler and Hayes really made it so darn meaningful.
The snowball at 50, people still.
Yeah, but I don't know. Denny, I wasn't a player or coach in that era, but I know that Minnesota was. That's what I got from my buddy. That Minnesota was a big game for Michigan.
Well, he's
right. In the 40s and early 50s.
Sure, Minnesota was big before there was TV and everything. Doc Blanchard and Army were really good and stuff. Back in the 40s too, but. In 36, that's when Tom Harmon, was getting a standing
ovation. Never beat Minnesota.
But he was getting a standing ovation at Ohio Stadium. That was the first time it ever happened. In 50, the snowball is like one of the greatest games they ever talked about. So, yeah, I think that Michigan in the 60s, even though they Big Bob Timberlake took him to the Rose Bowl, Woody had had built up such a giant squad there that it looked like Michigan would never be able to do anything against them. And then, Bo came in and won his biggest game that he ever won in his first time ever against Ohio State. How about that?
Yeah, that was the biggest game. He got everything rolling for him. Danny, I got something. I don't have it on your notes there, but I got some news.
Let's go.
I got some news from a source, a good source. That at the end of March, Michigan will have some big time NIL news that will really, really help Michigan compete NIL wise. So it's coming in late March. That's all I got from my guy, but my guy is usually pretty accurate. And so that's that.
I saw and I don't know if this is the same thing. It was whoever the Rock gets represented by, this digital company or whatever. I forget what their name is. I looked them up a little bit earlier, but they're the ones that at least there's been some talk that Michigan's got something up their sleeve with this performing arts and digital corporation worldwide that they're going to be involved in, which is going to be good for everybody. So
my source gave me these figures that Michigan players are all going to be doing pretty darn good and should really help us compete. Denny, I'm going to leave you on a joke here. Hey, what'd the fish say that swam into the wall?
Fish into the wall. I don't know.
He said, damn.
There you go, Scar. Great job, Scar. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, man. Go Blue.